Hi, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to show you an adaptation of a popular board game. This is the Castles of Burgundy card game. It's designed by Stefan Feld. This game, it plays from 2 to 4 players, and it says here 30 to 60 minutes for ages 12 and up. Many of you are probably familiar with the Castles of Burgundy board game. This is a card game adaptation that has a lot of the same features, a lot of the same abilities as in that kind of game, but it takes the spatial element out of that game and makes it into a set collection card game. I'll take a minute to show you how it works, and then I'll come back here and give you my thoughts on it. Okay, so this would be a 2-player setup of the Castles of Burgundy card game, and each player is going to begin with an area here in front of them where they're going to have a certain number of things. They're going to have a planning area where, as they draft buildings that have not yet been built, they'll store them here. You could have up to 3 of those. If you take a 4th, you'll have to discard one. They have a warehouse which could store any number of goods, of silver, and of animals, as well as workers. You'll start with one of each of those 3 things. Players who are later in turn order will get worker cards to compensate. I'll explain what all those do in a minute. And then you'll also get this, which represents your kingdom. You essentially will use this card to store victory points on either side of it, and it's just showing you that this is where you will create the stacks of cards that you collect as you complete your building projects. First player will get a card indicating that they are first, and if you own this card at the end of the game, it will be worth 1 point. Alright, then also besides that, in a general supply, there's going to be 2 stacks of goods cards. Those are going to be divided up into 2 stacks. You could draw from either stack when you draw. There is going to be, there are going to be 2 stacks of animal cards. Similarly, you could draw from either of those. You're generally going to want to collect different types of animals. There are these round marker cards. They go through E. The game's played over 5 rounds, and they also show you what bonus you get for completing a set of 3 projects of the same type during a game, or during the round. Whenever you complete 3 projects of the same type, you get to pick something from this basically menu of options, and over the course of the game that's going to be reduced until you have very few options if you complete something in round E. There is a supply of silver, which will allow you to get extra cards or could be converted into victory points. There is a supply of worker cards. There are these barrel cards which just function as victory points, and they come in quantities of 1 and 2. And there are these bonus markers. There's 1 of these for the first person to complete a set of 3 in each of the 7 colors. Those are each worth 1 point. And there's this, in the 2-player game there are 2 of them, and they get stacked in order from most points to least points, and they are awarded to a player when they've collected 1 of each of the 7 colors of cards. There's also a deck of cards. Each player is going to get 6 of those cards, which will essentially function as their die rolls each turn. So, beyond that then, finally, there is this card market, and you'll populate this depending on the number of players with a given number of cards. You'll put at least 1 or 2 at each number, and then any extras that you would flip up, you assign to the die value that's on the card. So here we would put 1 in each row, and then for the 7th card, whatever number comes up on the card is where that gets assigned. This is where you will be drafting your projects from, and I'll explain the types of projects in a minute. So the way that that turn works is pretty simple. At the start of the round, you're going to draw 2 cards, and those 2 cards will essentially tell you what your die rolls are. So this is as if a player had rolled a 3 and a 3. You don't need to pay attention to anything else on these cards. And each turn, all you're going to do is turn in 1 of these cards and execute an action. So, for example, this player might just discard out that 3, and they could take the card next to the 3. This is a project that they could build into their area, but they have not yet done that. In order to build a project, you have to pay, or you have to use the die that's depicted at the top of it. To take it, you need the die that's shown on this card. So they would just put that into their project area, their incomplete project area, remembering that they can only hold 3. Then at the end of their turn, they would just draw a 2nd card. So now they have a 2 and a 3. Next player would go, and they would draw 2 cards. Again, they get a 5 and a 6. So they might take this card using their 5 and place it in their incomplete area and draw a card. And the game's just going to go like this back and forth. So this player now has a 3 and a 2. This card, you remember, required a 2. So they could spend this card as their die roll to place this card into their kingdom, I suppose. They'll draw another card, and they would also execute the action that's shown on this card. Most cards will give you a special benefit as they are being built, not as you take them. So here, for building this, you're going to get to take 2 workers and put them into your warehouse. So that player would do that. Just take 2 worker cards and put them in their warehouse. The worker cards, I'll explain in a moment. This player here, they have a 6 card. This project requires a 6. This will allow them to take 1 animal and put it in their warehouse. And again, they can pick from either supply here. Generally, you want to collect animal types that you have not had yet, or you do not have yet, so because those will be endpoint scorings based on unique sets that you collect. So they have a pig over here. Hope you can see that. They have a pig, so they took a sheep. And now next card would flip up there. Alright, so now on this player's turn, they have, let's see, a 3 and a 4. Let's say that they really wanted this 5 card for some reason. What they could do is they could use their workers to augment the 4. So you see each one of these has a plus or minus 1. That allows you to adjust the die roll by plus or minus 1. And you can spend as many of these as you want with a single card. They only need 1 to turn this 4 into a 5. So they would use the 4, use the worker, and be able to take the 5 card. These other things that are in your area here, I'll explain those. So let's see, this player has a 4 and a 4. One of the other actions that you could take on your turn besides taking cards and placing cards is to sell goods. So the way that that works is you notice that each good type has 2 dice on it. You have to pay one of those 2 dice in order to initiate a sale. So this player only has 4s. They would have to turn that 4 into a 5, just as the other player just did. And then they would be able to sell this. When you sell goods, they'll be placed. And you could sell any number of goods of one color. There's 3 different colors of goods. You'll place them here under your start card, and each one of those will be a point at the end of the game, and then you would also take 1 silver for each good that you sold. The silver has 2 functions. Essentially, it could be turned in for points. Along with worker cards, you could discard a card of any value to turn in sets of silver and worker cards combined. So for every 3 cards you turned in, let's say somebody turned in these 3, you would get 1 victory point. So you would just take 1 of these cards here with 1 victory point and tuck it under your display there. So that would be an action. The other function of silver is that it could give you a bonus action on your turn. For 3 silver cards, you could turn those in once per game round. And if you do that, you get to draw the top 3 cards from the pile. And then you could either add any of these to your pending projects area, provided that you have room. If you don't have room, you'll have to discard 1, like I said before. Or you could execute the die action of any of these 3 values. So you could do a 2 die action, a 4 die action, or a 4 die action. And that's just a one-off thing each turn for turning in 3 silver. Again, over the course of the game, you're going to be building more and more of these. So let's say this player builds this one. And then, just for the sake of argument, they later build this one here. That would complete a set. If they are the first person to complete a set in that color, they would take the bonus for that color, which is here, tuck it under their card to show that they are going to get a victory point for doing that. And then this set would be considered complete. If they built another yellow card, they would need to start a new set of 3, but because it is a complete set, this set would be worth 4 points at the end of the game. So whatever value is down here determines how many points that set of cards is going to be worth. If you do not complete the set, they will be worth 0 points. Also, based on the round that you're in, you would get to pick one of these things. So you could take either just 3 victory points, 2 animal cards, 2 goods cards, 3 workers, or 3 silvers. And again, those rewards will go down over the course of the game. So this is how a round is going to go. One thing that I should mention is when this player initiated the sale, they would take first player marker. They would then be the first player in the next round, provided nobody else makes a sale. That always transfers to the person who has most recently made a sale. At the end of the round, if nobody has made a sale, you would just rotate it to the next player. So it's two-sided to indicate whether or not it's still up for grabs. And this is just going to keep playing out like this until players play all 6 of their die cards. So on your last turn, you'll just end up with 1 card, and you'll have to execute a 4 action. There are some essentially consolation prize actions that you could do if you don't have a card to place or a card to grab. So like I said, you could sell goods also. I demonstrated that. You could restock your workers by turning in a card of any value. You could restock your workers up to 2. So if you already have 1, you would just take 1 additional workers, but if you had 0, you would take 2. You can get more workers than 2 if you have a card that gives you workers or something, or you take them from completing a round bonus. But this action will only restock you to 2 regardless of how many you have, so it may not be useful if you have more than 2. You could always take 1 silver for a card action, or you can do what I said before, which would be turn in any number of silver plus worker cards for 1 victory point per 3 cards that you turn in. So those are the actions that you could do on your game or during the game. After you complete a round, you'll restock this area. Players will take 6 cards again each to use as dice. This will flip to round B, and then play would continue with the new first player if there's a new first player. So that's pretty much how the game will play out for 5 rounds. At the end of the 5 rounds, you're going to perform a scoring. You will score any cards that you've tucked under your main display here. So that would be for goods sold. And so for goods sold, it would also be for any victory point barrels that you've collected during the game, any bonuses that you've collected during the game as well. Then you will also get points for complete sets. So again, this set here would be 4 points. And then you would look at the animals that you've collected, and then for distinct sets of animals you'll score points. And the way that works is a single animal in a distinct set is worth 0, 2 are worth 1 point, 3 are worth 2 points, and if you have a set of 4, it would be worth 4 points. And then if you had leftovers, you could complete another set of that. So if I had these 4, that would be 4 points, but if I had these 2 as well, that would be an additional point. So those could get you a lot of points as well. And finally, like I said, 1 point if you have the first player card. In the case of a tie, the player who has the most cards left in their storage would be the winner. Animal cards, I guess, are not counted in that, just your workers and your silver. And yeah, that's pretty much how the game's going to work. I think I'll just briefly run through the 7 card types to give you a sense of what they do. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm missing 1, of course. Let me just take a quick gander here. Oh, it's the mine. Alright, so these are the 7 building types that you could get. So the mines, when you build a mine, you will get 2 silver added to your warehouse. When you build the pastures, you'll get 1 animal card of your choice added to a warehouse. These are all different, the yellow cards, but they have different benefits. So for example, this one gives you 2 workers. They could give you silver. They could allow you to grab a card from the display. They could just give you a victory point. So there's various things that these yellow cards are going to do. The castles, when you build those, they will give you a die action of any value. So you could just take another action and assign or decide which value you want to take. And you'll notice they all have different victory point values at the bottom for how valuable they are when formed into a set. Right, these brown cards are similar to the yellow cards in that they have distinct abilities. So this one, for example, it allows you to take either a yellow card or a brown card and put it in your pending project area, provided one is available, whereas this one here would allow you to get 3 silver and put it in your warehouse. Alright, I'll explain those in a minute. This allows you to just take a good, put it in your warehouse. And these are essentially wild cards. They can be used to complete any set. They don't give you a power when you take them, but if I had, 2 ships already constructed, I could place this behind the row of ships, and then I would have my set, so I might get the bonus, and I would score 4 points at the end of the game. A set of these alone would score 6 points, and finally, I could place this down first, and then later commit a card to it, and that would change the color of the wild card to the blue. So I think those are all of the basic rules that should give you a sense of how this game plays. And yeah, that is Castles of Burgundy, the card game. Alright, so that is Castles of Burgundy, the card game. And I'm a big fan of the Castles of Burgundy board game. And I should preface my comments with saying that I've played this so far twice, once with 2 players, once with 3 players. It might play better with 4. But I will say that I am somewhat let down by this. It's not something that I think I would choose generally to play over the board game version. I guess the good thing is that it does come in a smaller box, so if you needed to pack tightly to travel, you might want to take this. And it does potentially play more quickly. The box here says 30 to 60 minutes. Castles of Burgundy says 30 to 90 minutes, so that could potentially take longer, especially with more players. This game, it plays relatively smoothly, and it's familiar to those who have played the board game version. The idea of using cards as dice is pretty sound, and it almost begs the question of why not just include dice, I think, at a certain level. But everything in this game, every component is cards, and that's both clever, I can appreciate it from a design perspective, but at the same time it's a little bit clunky. Although this game, it comes in this tiny little box, it takes up as much table space, if not more table space, than the board game version. As players' kingdoms expand and they have sets and sets of piles, and the tableau where you're going to be choosing takes up a lot of space, and so on. So I'm not sure that's necessarily an efficient design, especially because from a usability perspective, these cards are pretty tiny. They're hard to shuffle. Like they're those original Ticket to Ride sized cards, and the iconography is somewhat unclear. At least the first 2 times I've played it. And even this is your main province card, and I hope you could see that, but maybe you can't because it's very difficult to even see what's going on there, just because of the sheer size of the card. So this is a game that's trying to pack a lot of information into a little bit of space, a little bit of playtime, and on a certain level, I think that that's really admirable. But on another level, it's essentially pretty complicated for what is just a set collection game. Most of the scoring in the game, not all the scoring, there are different paths to victory, of course, is going to be tied to forming sets of 3 using the various building projects that you're able to construct. So that's well and good, but it does mean that you're gonna, if you have 2 of a card color, you really need that 3rd card color to come out during a round. In a 2-player game, there's not a huge guarantee of that happening. Again, only in each round, only 7 cards are going to get flipped up. So if you have, let's say 2 blue cards, and a blue card doesn't come up, your only hope is that when you turn in some of those silver pieces, you draw a blue card, or perhaps you use one of those wild cards. But otherwise, you could just get bad luck in the card draw, and that could really, be the difference in this game. Generally you're going to be scoring about the same number of points as your opponent. And of course there was luck in the original board game. It was a dice game. But in the original board game, you were guaranteed that at least 1 tile of every color would come out during a round, just because of the way that the board setup worked. In a 4-player version of that board game, you would be guaranteed that every tile would come out during the whole game. So it became a question of jockeying for turn order, so you'd be in position to grab that tile. Here, with no guarantees that something may or may not come out, you really can't count on anything. Again, that might only cost you a few points, but in a game that's pretty tightly scoring, that could make all the difference. I should also mention that this game, it does come with a solitaire variant, and I did try that as well, and I didn't think very much of it. It essentially has you playing a number of rounds, building up your district each round, and then comparing to make sure that you have more points than a dummy player. The way the dummy player works is that they're going to get just 3 random cards placed into their kingdom in round 1, and then in round 2 they'll add 4 cards to that kingdom. So that would happen. Then they would add 5 cards in round 3, 6 cards in round 4, and 7 cards in round 7. And essentially you'll have to make sure that you have more points than them as they are, essentially collecting various sets and earning those bonuses. If ever during one of those rounds you're not ahead of them at the end of the round scoring, you would just lose. And the idea is to just get through all 7 rounds, always being ahead of this player. But again, that's just really a matter of luck, I think, to a certain degree, because if that player draws, 3 of the same color card in round 1, you essentially will lose unless you're extremely lucky yourself, because those 3 points would get them the first to complete that color bonus. Plus, they would also be worth 4 points. They'd have 5 points, which is not impossible to do in round one, but pretty hard. And if they complete a full set, with other sets before you do, which is probably likely in most cases, there's not a lot you can do about it. So not a huge fan of the solo game of this either. I think just generally, I felt that it was a little bit cumbersome, just swapping all these cards around. Although the game, it makes sense rules-wise because I've played enough of the base game board game, and I wasn't confused by what I was trying to accomplish or whatever. I found it relatively unengaging to just collect sets of 3 cards, especially compared to the interesting spatial puzzle that the original board game presents. That game has a lot of expansions already, a lot of different small rules modifications, different player boards that really mix it up and make every game feel different. I don't think that this game is going to feel especially different from game to game, and that's again having played 2 games plus a solo game of it. So overall, this is something that in very limited circumstances I could imagine playing if I was very pressed for time, or if I was traveling and wanted to take a Euro game that fit into a box that's this big, which is nice, I guess. But otherwise, I think in most circumstances, I would absolutely choose the original Castles of Burgundy over this. So, those are my thoughts on the Castles of Burgundy card game. Thanks for watching.